This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, medical, or mental health advice. We speak from our personal experiences and opinions. The views expressed are solely those of the individual speaker and are not intended to malign any group, club, organization, or business.
Hey everyone. Okay, well, I am back from Greece, back from my little 3 weeks of vacation and time down. One of the things I love about being your own podcaster, podcast producer, editor, all of it is I can just do whatever I want. So I took off and went to Greece for 3 weeks. I went to Greece for a week, but anyway, relax. So I'm back. Fresh and ready to kind of get back engaged. And I'm super excited to have back with us today on Confronting the Line, Brian Arbor, who is a longtime Landmark graduate, was a staff member, all those things. We'll put links to our first interview we did with Brian in the show notes. But what Brian and we've talked about a lot of things. Brian's a part of a kind of a whole group of us have sort of gathered together to just talk about our experiences and try to understand the good, the bad, and the ugly. And Brian, I think, you've brought forth a perspective on a topic that I think is really important in the self-help world, which is the whole world of PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome, complex PTSD, trauma, really, which is something we're really starting to dig into and understand more as a society. I would say we're still kind of in the toddler stages of our understanding. But one of the things that I've come to see is how participation in groups like Landmark, well, they do provide value. I'll never pretend they didn't. But they also, when we get so inside of it and we get so involved, and that becomes the only thing we're doing, which, folks, let's tell the truth, they are organized that way. I don't care what's coming out of their mouth. Everything in the system, what the leaders are measured on, everything is designed to have you come and do the programs and keep doing the programs. And to really, that's the answer. That's the answer to everything. And I really firmly believe in the hundreds of people I've heard from in the last year and a half. Probably the biggest damage has been, well, I don't want to rate damage, but for sure there's abuse. That's one thing. But the stuff that we don't get into or that we think we're working on that we're not really working on with the appropriate tools or the appropriate trained facilitator or leader or whatnot actually becomes the most damaging, because as we age, as we evolve and those things go unaddressed, like all diseases, whether physical or mental health, the symptoms get worse and it gets harder and harder. Anyway, Brian and I have been talking a lot about this. Excited to have you back today. And I wanted to start with saying hello and how are you? And just a little bit of follow up from our previous conversation. And then I asked you to dig into some information so we could talk about Chris Shelton's REM model, which we'll get into that a little bit too.
Absolutely.
So how are you doing?
I'm good. I just got back from a cousin's wedding in Philadelphia. And so having 4 or 5 days away from my regular routine is very refreshing. So after our initial recording, I then, as I shared that with friends and family and folks, it sparked conversations that I wasn't anticipating. So a lot of people had something to say about their own experience with trauma, about their something with their childhood or like a narcissistic parent, or just it was a conversation that there really isn't an outlet for. And just breaching the topic and something about me and my demeanor had people just start pouring stuff out. And I heard myself say to a friend, this is a conversation I could have every day of my life. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, shit, I'm starting a podcast.
Yes.
So I did some editing work while I was on vacation, which is awesome. I'd been a little burnt out on just the back end side of podcast work, but found a new way to look at that. Gives me a lot more energy around getting the work done, which is great. And part of that is I want to bring Confronting the Line over to the Traces of Trauma podcast to actually talk to you about, because you do all the research and education and certification, and I'm just over here sharing my experience and listening to others and bringing in people who do the work of healing. So, you function in a somewhat expert realm that I don't claim to traffic in. So it was great getting to connect with you over vacation and get this scheduled. And I did not expect the level of, I guess I'll just say freedom. I don't like it. It's not the right word, but there's a level of like relief
Mm.
just sharing what I need, like what my perspective is on, where these tools are helpful and where they're harmful. We didn't even get into a detailed analysis of the organization, but it
Just so much,
cracks
yeah.
things open. And it was, I guess, dangerous enough to raise some red flags with some people I'm close to who are still in the organization.
It's like how? What do you mean?
Like, Brian's gone on to join Ann Peterson on the dark side.
God.
So, however careful I've been to, speak the value and the danger in equal measure, the conversation itself is threatening for some folks.
Well, Brian, you just pointed to something though that's really key, which is so landmark folks, if you're listening out there, guys, if you want to stop being asked if you're a cult, stop fucking acting like one. Start there. Yes, we will put explicit on this episode because it just makes me crazy. I mean, it made me crazy when I was a staff member, even because I'm like, don't act like one. Like, if we keep getting so many people are asking that question, like maybe there's something we should look at. Well, one of the things to look at is this sidesism that if somebody is on the inside or outside, somebody is a graduate or not graduate, when you're deeply involved in that organization or that work or that world, that's how you get split. You're a graduate, they're not a graduate. And the more involved you are, the harder it is to interact with non-graduates because you're getting more and more, first of all, you're getting more and more invested in the language that doesn't make sense because they change the meaning of words and they, have a whole vernacular. And no, it's way more than a terministic string that goes with a profession, such as the medical profession or whatnot. In a group like this, they're actually defining words. So it doesn't make sense, but it's more this separation. The only side I'm on is the side of no abuse. That's the side I'm on. That's
Yeah.
the only side I'm on. No harm. That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
And you're oppositional to that side. What does that say about you? I think it says a lot more about that view than this view. So I'm for transformation, just for the record. In fact, that's one of the reasons I decided to speak up. I was originally, when I wrote the book, I was literally trying to save it. I was kind of trying to save the organization, trying to save the
Sure.
whatnot. And now I'm not so much about that. I don't actually really care one way or the other, but I'm definitely anti-abuse. And I am for educating facilitators and practitioners and whatnot to what are the mostly, honestly, unintentional harms. I still believe while there's definitely predators that thrive in these kinds of organizations. They thrive in Landmark and they thrive in organizations just like them. We've seen it all over Nexium, all of them, all these large group awareness group, massive transformational things. Predators are drawn to that because it's a place that they can hide and hang out and they can weaponize and use these tools to prey on people, and they do. So we need to tell the truth about that,
Hmm.
this as a organization and as a industry. But most of the harm, I actually really believe, now that I've been almost 2 years deep in this, I think it's mostly unintentional. It's to use, now I understand this came from Don Rumsfeld, not from Landmark, but it's in the domain of what you don't know about yourselves, Landmark. It's what you don't know, forum leaders. It's what you don't know, seminar leaders. It's what I didn't know, wisdom course leader.
And the unwillingness to admit that there could be blind spots like that
Yeah.
in those levels of the organization. Like you can't go to a program leader and tell them they're missing something. You can't go to a body of senior executives or function at the headquarters office and say, hey guys, as a company, we're missing the mark. And nobody
Hundreds
wants
of
to
people
hear
have
it.
tried. For those of
Nobody
you
wants
out
to
there
hear it.
listening, so many people say to me, Brian, I still hear it, but why didn't you go to somebody who could do something about it? Because that's the inside line. Like, what makes you think I would risk my reputation, all my relationships, my friend, my finances, everything? Because that's what it felt like when I published that book, to speak out. What makes you think I would risk all that without having gone to somebody who could do something about it?
Well, I was one of a
Hundreds of
5-person
people.
human resources department.
Yeah.
at the World Headquarters Office responsible for HR functions worldwide. And when I go to the director of human resources about the way people are speaking to me and to each other and say we have a problem, and that gets brushed under the rug, deflected, protected, there are like documented corrective actions for like verbal assault, physical assault, and this person is just being wildly inappropriate as a representative of our brand, let alone like as a human being and like what's criminal. And it's brushed aside with a transformational two-step of how I need to develop myself so that I can receive any kind of feedback and remain empowered in the face of it rather than dealing with the real what's happening on the ground. It's like, oh, no, we're just going to shuffle that aside so that our high performers keep functioning. We're going to make this
Yeah.
your issue because you're the one who's raising an issue. So if you have something bad to say about us, even though you're on the inside seeing it, then you need to change your point of view because we're not going to change.
So, and people going to all the way up to Joan Rosenberg and saying, hey, this person's calling me names. This person tried to strangle me. You know, Eric Rojas' story. You guys can hear these stories. Go back and listen to Confronting Line, the episode with Eric Rojas, the episode with the gals from LA. You know, time and time and time and time again, they have had the opportunity to correct those behaviors and they don't. They don't. They have worked again and again and again to hide them, which, look, I have a little bit of understanding. I know we live in a society where, as a business organization, if you admit that kind of activity, you could really be at risk for huge legal action. But we've now found over 20 lawsuits anyway. Like they were already being sued, and almost at least half of those say the exact same things over and over and over across 20 years. Same complaints, same things. And those same people, some of them still work for the organization, even though they've downsized considerably. So, what does that communicate? Your words mean nothing if your actions don't follow. And honestly, for me, the most frustrating part is the way they violate their own ideas and their own works. It's just really frustrating. And so, anyway, blah, blah, blah. I can rant about that forever. But what
Yeah.
I'm curious about too is so you said, you know, and speaking up, and I can definitely relate to that. When I spoke up, I've literally now had hundreds of people come to me just because I was a place they could tell what happened to them, that it could be heard. And that's tough. That's tough. That's taken a bit of a toll. Thank goodness I have good personal support in both my immediate community, but I have a spiritual teacher I work with and a practice that I engage with. And I've had lots of people from the kind of post-cult world come up along beside me and been just incredible friends and support, but also a therapist and, you know, all kinds of stuff. But it's still been really hard. It's been heartbreaking in a lot of ways. And I'm just curious how's that going for you? How's that feeling for you? Because I recognize the relief you're talking about. Like on the one
Yeah.
hand, oh, we can talk about this honestly. But
Yeah.
anyway, just how's that been for
It
you?
it hasn't been much. And part of that is the like dissociation that's like was baked in from trauma before I went on staff. So I was surviving and trying to thrive and navigate the social politics at the headquarters office and like hold center managers accountable for like doing squirrely shit that's illegal and I'm trying to uphold human resources and employment standards and process payroll and like maintain personnel files and ensure accurate personnel data and report to government agencies on like all the stuff that happens in a company. And I would bet that some of the folks out there are folks that I squashed as someone functioning in the headquarters office. And I haven't heard from those people. So that outpouring of like, oh, I can go talk to Anne. I just invite anybody who I like handled or diminished or did harm to, if you want to, like I welcome you to reach out to me and like I can listen to that and here I am having the thought at the same time I'm speaking like, oh, that's such a great demonstration of Landmark's values, like being able to listen to anything and like hold space. And okay, so what?
Well, I think you're representing really well, Brian. Like to me, when I talk with you, you're representing what honestly, in my experience, is the majority of the staff in that particular organization, but I would suspect in most organizations like it, which is you are sincerely there to make a difference. You are sincerely there because you believe in the ideas and the power of them. You believe in transformational methodologies and approaches. You believe in possibility. You believe in the good in people. That's who the majority are.
Well, and
The
in the
issue is
model,
they don't realize they're not in an organization that is actually about that.
yeah,
That is the cover, like to literally use the actual definition of racket. That's the candy store and there's something else going on in the background, and that is not our fault. It's just not our fault, and we didn't know that, and we did our best, and you're representing like so many, most all leave at some point, because at some point, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, Brian Nord's another great example, like literally on a Monday called up, said, "I'm out, I'm done, don't ever call me again," because that was the only way to get away after 20 some years. But it's because you come to a point where you realize, or you suspect at least, A, they're not that. They're not everything you think, or you can't make the difference. You can't make a difference in the organization. I've talked to a number of staff members who went on staff because they thought they could make a difference in the condition of the center staff, particularly. They thought that they could. They did everything. They went up the line, up and down the line, tried to demonstrate it, tried to demonstrate you
yeah,
could do the job in 40 hours a week, blah, 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 all this stuff. And to a one, they were chewed up and spit out. They either conformed and became the toxicity of that culture, or they got sick and they're very at the effect of that. There's a number that I know that way.
hmm,
Or they left and they're sick.
yeah,
I mean, we're our healthy healing group with Rachel Bernstein, which I cannot say enough. Anyway, especially former staff and program leaders of any organization like this, if you're out there listening, please reach out. We have a sliding scale. Come join this group. You can do it confidentially. We are learning so much about ourselves and about these kinds of organizations and relationships, because if you leave one, you're going to go into another unless you deconstruct it.
yeah. And
So,
so much of that is like, was really clear as I listened to episode 49 with Chris Shelton about the REM model, the rationalization, emotion, and morals, that they function on both sides of the fence. They're
mhm,
both like
yes, they
critical
bring you in and
in,
they help you deconstruct coming
yes,
out. Yeah.
the the most of the staff at Landmark intend well. Like I know I did. Like the part of the trauma of leaving was that I'd given up on making a difference, that I'd like betrayed my core values by saying enough is enough and like having to reconcile all that. And that's like, it's an indicator that all of me, the real all of me, was not part of the organization that I stepped away from, or it wouldn't have been such a jarring shock to my system. Like I could stop recording my podcast now. I'm not going to. I could stop 20 years from now, but the who I am isn't defined by that action. And to a large extent, who I was as a person was defined by my relationship with that organization.
Well, yeah, because that's a key aspect. So, like you said, I can't remember if you said it on air yet or before when we were talking ahead, but we were talking about how Brian and I kind of nerd out a little bit on the distinctions and the distinctions. That's what the ideas are called in the organization. It's not the actual definition of distinctions, by the way. Look it up sometime. And it's like, what? Wait. But that is how it works. So you become part of the system. So when you join an organization, it's very slow. It's very, very slow. It does not happen quickly, but you go in because you want to make a difference and you want to be a part of something. And there's an avenue and an expression. And it's what's so great about an organization like Landmark is that you don't have to have qualifications. You don't have to They'll train you. They'll train you. The problem is they're only training you in their view and in their perception and in their definitions and their body of work. So what happens is you go in and you're like, okay, I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to all this and that. The structure is that you first can reproduce the ideas, then you can speak from the ideas, and then you become the ideas. That's designation in leadership, right? You become designated as the thing that whatever role, accountability role you're playing. But what does that mean? What that means on the inside is you now embody it. You are it. You have functionally supplanted your persona, your identity with the identity of that role. That is the aim. And folks, that is culty. That is culty. That is more than a little bit culty, and it is psychologically not healthy. I can teach an idea, I can teach it masterfully without becoming it. And that is something that they don't understand, because the objective, if you start to really learn the history, it all gets really, really, really clear. Read Marsha Martin's book. She was one of the originals and she kind of lays out the early parts, but the whole initial objective was to become Werner in the world. That was the point of being a leader in that organization, was to become Werner Erhard in the world.
Yeah.
They haven't diverged from that very far, not as far as they think they have.
Yeah. And I want to kind of draw a line in this conversation, because it's one thing to become the idea. And there are lots of ideas. There are lots of what they would call tools in the toolbox, right? There are lots of approaches and methods and conversations and distinctions for unraveling where we feel stuck and like stepping into a sense of personal power. Great. It's awesome to ingrain those tools and to have them start to come up reflexively until they're not helpful, not useful, and you realize you don't have any of the tools that you actually need for this specialized job called trauma. Like, okay, fine. It's something else to become the role, to become program leader, to become landmark forum leader, to become staff member. We're beyond being someone who is a walking demonstration of the tools, techniques, and ideology of the organization. You now surrender your identity to what someone tells you this role is. The role. So, a staff member is this way and they're not that way. And a staff member always, and a staff member never. And
Which, by the way, is a little arbitrary and capricious, because it'll change from time to time. Like whoever your manager, like it changes as different people. I was really like, I worked in the same area with the same people who honestly were wonderful. I still love my managers and executives. I don't know if they like me anymore, but I definitely appreciated them. They were fabulous with me.
well, by the time I was there, willingly submitted myself to that.
Yeah.
I was 25. I was figuring out how to get my freaking life together. I just gotten back from a combat zone like 3.5 years ago and was like trying to like rebuild who I am. And so great. Tell me who to be so I can be this awesome, shiny, amazing person.
Mm.
And over time, it like my willingness to scrap and rewrite myself based on what I was told I was supposed to be as like all of who I am is constituted inside this organization, inside this role, and it's the context for my entire life. Like like those are direct conversations that are had. Like you are never not a staff member, whether you're on the clock or not. Like you're never not representing us anywhere in the world, in any conversation, in any circumstance. Like, and to be proud, to be highly capable of always putting a good foot forward for the organization, no matter what was happening. It takes away honoring the pieces that are human instead of the pieces that are intentionally constructed.
Well, it also sets up there's a double bind, because there you are supposed to be this identity that we're giving you, and it fluctuates from here to there or whatever. And we've heard the stories. We've heard the stories of Native American peoples being told to cut their hair. We've been told stories of gay people being told to clean up their lifestyle and to change things about their social life. We've heard those kinds of stories from staff and program leaders that have left. So you're supposed to be this whole identity, but the work itself is about full self-expression, being fully yourself, your big self, not your little self, which refers to the psychological principle of kind of who the identity formulation that we experience mostly they're mostly using Freudian psychology. I know they think they don't use psychology at all, but they're full of it anyway. So we have this identity that we formulate as we make various decisions and so on. I mean, this is the whole program. And the whole idea of that they're teaching is that you're going to bust out of that you're going to be available to be anything you invent yourself to be, unless you become a program leader or staff member or some kind of accountability to the organization. Then you need to be exactly who we tell you to be, look how we tell you to look, speak the way we tell you to speak, all of that. And that sets up a double bind, because
But
then you're contradicting what you're teaching.
the catch is, by that point in time, it doesn't occur like an outside force intruding. It occurs like someone sees me for who I really am, which is that thing that I am supposed to be. And I just need to shed whatever they see that I don't see is in the way about who I am. So it's not, at some point, it stops occurring like an outside force trying to shape me, and it shows up more like, oh, I trust you to tell me when how I'm speaking, how I'm presenting, if what I'm wearing, if like that post I put on Facebook, if the way that I'm upset about this interaction is off point for someone who is supposed to be a living, breathing demonstration of this kind of human being. You tell me, and then I'll change myself so that I'm more true to who I say I really am. And then and then you leave, and no one will talk to you beyond what you might be useful for.
Mm.
The entire community, the relationships that are built, all cut off, because you're no longer playing the same game as they are, and they don't have any time to spend with anyone who isn't up to exactly the same things and like on their team. So, it's like, okay, you played football and you stopped playing football, and now none of the football players will talk to you because all they do is live and breathe football, and anything else is a distraction
Yeah.
and diminishes the game itself.
Right.
Except when you map that up to like exploring what it is to be a human being and to like be the best version of yourself that you can be. And wait a minute, you're not going to do that over here with us. We're done with you.
Mm.
That doesn't fit. So I actually want to like dig into this REM model, because a lot of what we're touching on.
Hang on, I just want to pause you for just a second on that.
Yeah.
Because that's really, I just felt that in my heart, like all the way to my bones, what you said about then you leave and you're disappeared. You're a ghost. And that is really rough. I was lucky in ways, because when I left Landmark, which was in 2012, I was working on the Werner project. So then I was like, I was still very much in the world and in contact. It wasn't really until 2020, then I had the pandemic for cover. I was finding out all this information about Werner, and I was scared to talk to anybody because I didn't want to ruin their transformation. But I remember having another leader tell me one time, who had been a leader for 20 some plus years, like forever and ever. She was a communication course leader, amazing woman. And she said, "Anne, when you leave, it's like getting dropped off a bus in the middle of the desert with nothing, and nobody will talk to you, like that." And then slowly, sort of the diaspora, they do start to find each other. Like there's some of that, especially because there's some coalescing around trying to protect yourself, because Landmark's very threatening to people who leave, who try to stay in the field in any realm. Like you're fine if you go do something totally radically different, but if you try to stay in coaching or consulting or whatnot, they're pretty harsh. I just really felt that. So I just want to take a moment to mark that, and to mark that for anybody out there listening who may be feeling like that. And I want you to know you're not alone. There's a whole community now, Is this a cult book discussion, the private group on Facebook where you can come, you can listen, you can be heard, you can talk, you can be seen. And we do live calls where we sit around and we just tell fun stories sometimes. That whole part of your life and your experience, you don't have to pretend it never happened. You don't have to be left wondering what happened. That's how come you and I are talking, because you're part of that group. And it's been really nurturing. And anyway, as you said, so I just wanted to mark
Yeah.
that. That's,
Well, and it's
I think,
brutal. It's brutal. But I also, not that anybody designed it this way on purpose, but I think it's important. I think
mm,
it's important that when staff members leave, they're not caught up and tangled in trying to maintain relationships with a toxic ex.
oh, that's a good point. Say more about that.
It, uh, and I was desperate. I was desperate to try and stay connected with people and keep up and stay engaged. And I continued assisting in their volunteer and trade for training and development programs. So we can't call it volunteering, but I was not an unknown person in those circles. And I stuck around for a long time, continuing to contribute and try and make a difference and maintain connection to that community, because that community was what defined who I was.
Yeah.
I defined myself in measure against the ideals of that community.
Okay.
And without any feedback, like without any other human interaction, I didn't have other communities of people in my life, even at that point. I
Mm.
had my family who, you don't go to your brothers and aunts and uncles and your parents to be like, hey, who am I? It's just like, but I didn't have that group of friends from college. I didn't have the like nerd pod that gets together to play Magic the Gathering. I didn't have like my own circles of people who weren't entrenched in that work
Mm.
um, to give myself and my life meaning.
It almost feels like what you're describing is, if you get deeply involved in a group like this, it almost sort of supplants your own development. Like, we think we're going in to develop as humans, but I keep hearing this thread from people like you, and even looking at it for myself, because there is a little bit of this experience of like, I missed 25 years of my life. Now,
Well,
I
when
did
you do develop something,
I'm at 57 finding myself shockingly right where I was when I started participating. In a lot of ways, it's a very interesting thing. This Rachel Bernstein's been kind of helping us through that a lot. Like, a lot of us are sort of figuring out like, oh, wow, some of the things that we even participated for initially, there was some movement in those areas. I'm not going to pretend there
mhm,
wasn't, but a lot of it's kind of still there. Like, wait. But this thing you're bringing up about, but who am I? It sounds a little bit almost like you're describing, however many years later it is now, you're kind of where you were at 25 when you went in staff, just get like this nice, tidy identity that was created for you that you could just step right into, which is kind of nice. I don't know. No lie there.
I mean, that's why people join the military.
Yeah.
So you don't have to worry about who to be or what to do or what to wear or what decisions to make and it's valuable. And
So that's
the
kind of like the bennies, as it were, of a high control group, because military could easily be said to be a high control group, right? As do many religions, where there's a set of rules that tell you who to be, how to act, da 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 da.
and all of those benefits, the military doesn't hide that those benefits come at a cost. Everyone knows that when you join the military, you're going to pay.
Possibly your life.
And when you step into a transformational organization, they don't tell you this is going to cost you. This is going to cost you like real progress in being at peace with the trauma that lives in your biology. We're going to
No, in
we're
fact,
going
they
to
tell you it's going to cure it.
we're
Actually,
going to teach you, well, you're going to not experience that.
right?
We're going to relieve you of those symptoms, but that relief isn't going to equal actual healing. As soon as you stop doing these tools, as soon as you stop having an environment that calls you into these kinds of conversations, all that shit's going to come crashing back down. Like, you're committing to a lifetime of continuing to practice this if you want it to continue working.
Mm.
And my stamina for battling PTSD and trauma with transformational tools was very high in my 20s. I could just keep going
Wow.
and give more and sleep less and like fake it till I make it so good that I didn't know I was faking it. Like, and I hit my fees, and that well of inexhaustible energy is no longer accessible. And the cost of trying to operate that way is much more noticeable. And I had been out of those conversations for a good while, and it still took everything I had to turn to the VA and say, hey, I'm done doing what I've been doing for 20 plus years to deal with this. I want it to be easier. Help me fix my circumstances.
Well, therein lies another difference between the military, which we just correlated to, compared to a control group, and a group like Landmark. Landmark has done nothing to support their former staff, nothing, except for shut them up. A few of them that tried to say something got paid off. I've offered them many times if they would like to support the Healthy Healing Group. I'd be the first to shout from the rooftops that they're actually taking actions to support the damage that's been done.
Mm-hmm.
Real or imagined doesn't even matter. It's still there. But the military, it does recognize, and they haven't always, but they have evolved and grown.
Mm-hmm.
It does, as an institution, recognize the harmful aspects of one dedicating themselves to that path and that career and provide the resources. We can argue about whether it's enough or it's good enough or whatever, but it does. It does do something to take care of the people who dedicate and commit themselves to service and experience harm for that. And that's one of the things that I have again and again, and I'll keep doing it, challenged Landmark and groups like it to do, is to step up and just recognize a lot of it was unintended. We realize that. But come on, step up. There's all this damage. Help, offer something. Look, I get the risks of that, but hey, they've bankrupted the company. You can't even sue them really. So they're in the free and clear. So why not own it? And why not be part of the solution? Well, let me ask you, I want to ask you one thing before we get into Chris's model, because I realized I was like, ooh, he would have something to say about this. Have you heard the term moral injury?
Huh?
So I'm curious. I've been thinking about this a lot recently as it relates to Landmark and groups like it. So moral injury is according to ChatGPT, the deep emotional, psychological, and sometimes spiritual distress that occurs when a person feels they have violated or been forced to violate their own core moral beliefs or values. It can occur when someone witnesses or is betrayed by others, especially authority figures or systems, or who act in ways that contradict those moral standards. And I would say, in our experience in this group, the first bit of moral injury is when you get deep enough on the inside structures to see that they violate their own moral standards. They violate their own teachings. They violate their own kinds of principles that you understood coming into it. So that's the first layer. But then I say that all staff and program leaders are suffering from some aspect of moral injury because they saw somewhere, somehow. They saw somebody being mistreated. They were mistreated themselves. By mistreated, I mean treated in a way that was directly contradictory to the very teachings of the group. Then we go on to, that escalates from there on to, just really reprehensible behaviors, name calling, insulting. And then now I've heard a number of cases of physical abuse, pinching, hitting, slapping.
In the early stages, it's akin to like little white lies. Like, who has made it to adulthood, even if they've never been in a cult or a large group awareness training or a high control environment, without some kind of moral injury? Like, you told Aunt What's Her Face that she looked pretty when her hair was as blue as the bottle the dye came in. Like, whatever. Like moral
Right.
injury, moral injury, moral
A
injury. You
betrayal,
see somebody,
fundamentally, it's defined as a betrayal of what's right. This
yeah.
ties right into Chris's model because the foundation is our moral understanding of what's right, what's wrong in the
Well,
world,
and
what's proper conduct.
anybody who's been through one of Landmark centers has probably seen something that was like, what was that? Or has had some kind of interaction that was like, ew, why did that person think they could talk to me that way? And the minute you step past that, you've brushed your own sense of what's right under the rug for the ease of not
Mm,
having a confrontation, right?
yeah, well said.
So it starts really small. And as years go by, years and years go by, decades for some people, you're in the heart of this organization, and the things that you brush under the rug or just sweep aside, step over, accept as that's the way it is, they get bigger. They get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and they become something that feels inevitable. Like it's an inevitable, unavoidable part of life, of doing business, of engaging in transformational work, of whatever it is.
Well,
So,
another one of those double bind contradictions because, I mean, as a staff member, I'm sure you studied the same document I did about the diminution of integrity, that when we tolerate a misstep, a lack of integrity, then we lower the bar and lower the bar and lower the bar until you functionally can't function.
and I never managed to find myself on the right side of the equation and there were people who were always on the right side of the equation, and I don't know how the hell they did it,
Who is on the
but
okay, what's the right side of the equation?
the right side of the equation is you can tell other people when their integrity is diminishing, when they've not done something they said, or when they're not being some way that they're expected to be. And they, in turn, are expected to correct themselves to satisfy what you have seen from above is out of standard. However, the wrong side of the equation is when you go to address something with someone that is not the way it should be, that violates a policy that's inappropriate in the workplace, that, just straight up like, hey, I don't appreciate that, all the way up to, no, you can't code bonuses that way in the payroll, and try to do battle for what's right. And you're accused of just being on it, which is code for petty.
Okay, this is where I do have to. I know this will harken. This probably triggers some people because in the wisdom area, we were always like supposedly better. But God damn it, we were. That shit didn't happen to me. I'm so glad. I went to my manager, I remember early on, the head of our division, one moment, and I was, anyway, she had yelled at me, or at least I thought she'd yelled. Anyway, whatever. So I call her, I get all my courage together, clear with my, my main mentor, Margie, and anyway, and I call her up and I'm like, and I'm crying. I realize in my own work that when somebody yells at me, I'm like a 2-year-old, like I'm pre-lingual and I can't talk.
Mm-hmm.
It was a huge breakthrough. I'm going to get my manager on the phone and I call her and I'm a brand new staff member. I've just been hired on as a staff program leader. I'm by far the youngest by like 30 years. I'm like this kid on the block. And so I'm way low on the hierarchical thing. I called her up and I said, and I'm crying and I'm like, and when you talk to me like that, and it's like a breakthrough for me because I'm actually talking through my crying. And she was actually really great. She listened to me the whole time. She was awesome. She goes, I said, and it's against policy to yell at, whatever, and I get the whole thing said. Oh my God, I'll never forget this. And she goes, oh my God, I'm so sorry I was yelling. She goes, I'm Italian. I grew up in an Italian family. That's not yelling. And I just said, I grew up in the Pacific Northwest where looking sideways is yelling. So we had this it was really great. And she was awesome. Like she never yelled at me ever again. And I guess I just want to tell that story because I want all the people out there listening that have been a part of this organization that had good experiences to know you don't have to let go of those. You don't have to let go of your love for transformation. You do not have to let go of your breakthroughs. You do not have to let go of all the wonderful experiences you had to also acknowledge that there is darkness in this organization and that a lot of people have been hurt. We have the kind of brain that will let us hold both of those things. And
Yeah,
so anyway, I just had to like you remind me
for
because I'm like,
sure. Well, and I'm
but I
curious.
know I've
Yeah,
heard what you've said from so many people. Like
and we're
that's
not.
more common what you
Yeah,
experienced.
we're not here on a podcast called Confronting the Line to share the good times. We're
Mhm.
sharing where's the line.
A line, yeah.
And it's like, there are those like, oh my God, that was yelling. I came from an Italian family. That wasn't yelling for me. I'm so sorry. Then it never happened again. See, that's how it's supposed to go.
Yeah.
When the phrase that follows that is, and I'm not going to change. So you're going to have to get used to it
Mm.
because you having this reaction shows your lack of transformation.
Boy, they. Wow.
That is the kind of shit that went down over and over and over. So the how dare you come to me with a correction
Mm. I'm so sorry.
partnered with you're always going to be on the receiving end of orders to adapt. You're always the one that's deficient. You're never the one that actually is like seeing true
Yeah.
that others are going to align themselves to. That diminishes a person
Yeah.
over time.
Well, and it's exactly like you're saying. That's why this whole thing about moral injury has been really interesting to me. Nailed it exactly. Like when we witness or accept or see or experience, whether it's being done to us or others, and we're just seeing it. I had some people tell me that about the Werner stuff that I knew, like me, witnessed. I didn't witness any of the physical harm, but I did witness screaming and yelling and name calling and things like that. And it never occurred to me that I was being harmed by that. One, because I had learned to disassociate so well and so effectively that I didn't, I was like, what? Huh?
Yeah.
I mean, it literally wasn't until a lawyer explained abuse to me and I went, oh, I saw that all the time. That's abuse? Really? And then I actually did some work to kind of open my heart a little bit. And I realized, like, oh, yeah, that did hurt because who was being hurt were people that I really loved. Brian Nord tells a story about being sat in the center of a center for a whole day and everybody being told not to interact with him and not talk to him because he was so bad at his job that, his only job that day was to sit and observe people doing the job for real. That's humiliation. And that was horrible for Brian. But all those people in that center that were being forced to not speak to him, there's real psychological and emotional and spiritual damage, folks, being done when you are forced into those situations. I know of center managers there's kind of two kinds of center managers, the ones that conformed and became abusive, or the ones who took the abuse. This was my husband for sure, took the abuse on themselves to protect the graduates. And those people are suffering and I just don't want them to be alone. That's really my heart and the whole thing. Like, don't be alone. And if you are isolated, that's suffering and you don't have to have that. Like, because there are people you can talk to now. There are people you can come and say, you know what? That really hurt. And that's what takes healing. Healing cannot happen in darkness. Healing needs light. Healing does need this space to express and to say. And so
Yeah.
if you experience things where some of the common causes acting against your personal values, like doing things, witnessing things, seeing things that were against your personal values, and then you remain silent, that creates a kind of moral injury. Witnessing transgressions, seeing others do things that you thought were wrong or were not right, and you were unable, and it really is unable to say something, sometimes because of your own limits, but quite often the institutional limits, the limits in the organization. Like you said, you go to the people and you're told, I mean, Eric talked about going all the way up to the top of the line about being strangled by a center manager. And they were said, well, who are you being that they needed to strangle you? Like, come on, you can't talk in that. Being betrayed by trusted authority, that was a big one for me. I mean, that's what really spit me out was like, they rejected me actually and told me to basically shut up and sit down and not, don't do business. And in fact, they wanted me to pretend that I had never even done the project I had just spent the last 10 years of my professional life doing. It's crazy. Or moral constraint, being forced into impossible situations where all available choices cause harm. So no win situations. So all of those make that up. And so I wanted to just, it dawned on me as you were talking, I'm like, Brian knows this. You distinguish.
I mean, it happens in the classroom when you witness a teacher bullying a student, but you're too little to do anything about it.
Right.
It happens in the military when we go overseas and we treat other human beings like their life has no value because they're not
Mm.
Americans. And who I thought my country was and the organization I thought I like carried a gun for is showing up to not be who they said they were. And then I have to be who I'm ordered to be
Mm.
inside that organization.
I keep,
The moral injury is like the hardest injury to actually get treated. It's the
it is.
hardest injury to
It's the
demonstrate.
deepest, it's the
Uh,
closest to the core
well, and
of who we are, you know?
to go to the military and say, "Hey, you did this to me. This happened on your watch." They need to like you got to prove the level to which that incident is currently disabling you.
Well, what do you think about what's just curious? I don't want to get too political here, but I can't listen to this and not be able to think about what's happening in our country right now, where soldiers are being asked to, patrol and guard our own streets. And there's organizations inside of our government that are definitely seeming to gleefully and willfully perpetrate cruelty and harm and whatnot. I'm not talking about that. Okay, that's the predatory mindset, which in groupthink can get very, very dangerous. We've seen it in our history before. We're witnessing it now. But I keep thinking also about the soldiers that have to stand there that don't agree with that, or that don't recognize that that's a violation of our Constitution, that that's a violation of what our country is all about, and what has been the moral backbone of our country. And that's probably why moral injury is on my mind, because I'm like, whoa, in a couple of years, we're going to have a lot of people really suffering from significant moral injury. And it gets serious, folks. This is a foundational element of a emotional, spiritual, psychological trauma that will have to be addressed. The thing about trauma is it doesn't go away. We think that if we leave the situation, the trauma leaves, but it doesn't. The trauma goes with us because the trauma happened with us. The incident, the situation happened out here, right? Like you told the story in our first thing about the kid, coming to thank you for the water bottles and having to make a decision about what to do about that kid. I mean, that's deeply traumatizing. I'll never forget that story. So the incident, yes, you've moved on from the incident, but the injury is internal. The injury goes where you go. And we do have the kind of mind that will let us separate ourselves and disassociate, but our body doesn't.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
in the body. It will stay and stay and stay until it gets fully digested and processed. And that's why I keep saying you can't heal trauma in the darkness. You can't make yourself small enough or disappear enough to have it go away. And I call it a progressive disease. It progresses, it evolves, it expresses itself in so many ways. Dr. Glenn Doyle talks about how it wraps around all of your relationships, because the conditioning that you develop to survive the trauma becomes the way you interact socially. And then pretty soon you're not able to function in relationships. That is death for human beings. So folks out there listening, if any of this resonates with you, please reach out. Please reach out, whether it's to us or somebody else. We'll connect you with the resources because they're out there. And yeah. All right. So tell me, okay, that was a deep subject. Hey, Anne here, recording a little outro. So this conversation with Brian, pretty amazing. And it went on 2 hours. So I've cut it into two parts. You've just listened to part one. So I'll be dropping part two in the next couple of days, week at the most. And I hope you're enjoying the conversation as much as I did. I learned a lot and it gets even better. If you get the time, please hit that like, subscribe, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever is your listening preference really helps us out. I've also added a little the membership feature that's on YouTube. I've turned off the ads because it was just annoying. So to try and help support making of this content, I did turn on the little bit membership thing. So for $2.99, you can help us out, just help me afford an editor. How's that? Anyway, but in the meantime, I'm going to keep having these great conversations. They're making a big difference for me. I hope they are for you too. We will have a link to Brian's podcast in the show notes, as well as some link backs to some of the other things that Brian and I have done. Really smart conversations. And it's very fun doing this deconstructing with other people who are in the same, they're looking, we're learning, we're growing. And finally, if any of this really resonates with you, as I said in the show, please don't go it alone. Step out, reach out to me. You can reach me via my book website, isthisoccultbook.com. You can, most of you have my email, whatnot, and I will happily share the information. It's also in the show notes for the Rachel Bernstein Healthy Healing Group. That has been such an incredible resource. If you want to participate confidentially, we've got a way to do that. So just don't go it alone. Reach out if you need support. Thanks for listening. See you soon.